we will try this new setup so that it's not just my desk, it can be my couch. Hi guys, this is Connie, and we have just finished another Find Myth. I am in the process of getting a couple of other books because somewhere around here is The Giver, and I want to read The Giver. I also started To Kill a Mockingbird currently. I'm not sure when it's going to go up, and I didn't do a vlog yet today, so I'm hoping this doesn't default into a vlog. But actually, I wanted this to be the introduction to what I'm going to call Connie reads cover to cover. This is one of Aesop's Fables. Yeah, we'll put that in there too. This was a book that I found in my elementary school library, and I would come back when I was in high school to look at it and to read it, and said, if you guys ever decide to, filter this out of the library, I want it. Just because it looked like such a cool book. Not that you can judge a book by its cover, but it's also got awesome stuff, like awesome painted pictures and lots of old-timey Aesop's Fables. And I never actually read it to cover, even though I used to check it out like this, old school style, which makes me super happy because it means that in second grade I was still doing little crazy signature initial thingies in my books. So some of the things that I do now have been some things that I've been doing for a really, really long time. So, cover to cover, because there are some awesome pictures and animations, and it is old school Aesop's Fables. I didn't even realize I had this in here. It's a picture of me Christmas Eve, the first night that we dated. We went out to sushi, and this was before we opened gifts and got one of the best gifts of all, which was my engagement ring, and Mustachio had proposed to me. So lots of good memories, even just from the first opening of the cover. I'll make that my bookmark, though. And I love the little script that it has of this. I'm not going to do this like a picture book. However, when there are pictures, I'm not going to turn around and flip every page. But there are some pictures that are just beautiful. This is just an old copy of a great book. And it made me happy. And I feel remiss to not actually read this cover to cover. So I'm going to do it here with you guys and share it. First published in 1912. This edition, 1967. Woo! And all the information for the Library of Congress catalog card number 68-11494. First American publication, 1968, by Franklin Watts Incorporated. Printed and bound in Great Britain by Bookprint Limited, Crawley, Sussex. Ooh. Introduction. Aesop embodies an epigram not uncommon in human history. His fame is all the more deserved because he never deserved it. The firm foundations of common sense, the shrewd shots at uncommon sense that characterize all the fables, belong not to him, but to humanity. In the earliest human history, whatever is authentic is universal, and whatever is universal is anonymous. In such cases, there is always some central man who had first the trouble of collecting them, and afterwards the fame of creating them. He had the fame, and, on the whole, he earned the fame. There must have been something great and human, something of the human future and the human past in such a man, even if he only used it to rob the past or deceive the future. The story of Arthur may have been really connected with the most fighting Christianity of falling Rome, or with the most heathen traditions hidden in the hills of Wales. But the word Mape or Mallory will always mean King Arthur. Even though we find older and better origins of the Mabinogian, I hope I didn't completely butcher that word, or write later and worse versions of the Idylls of the King, the nursery fairy tales may have come out of Asia, with the Indo-European race now unfortunately extinct. They may have been invented by some fine French lady or gentleman like Perrault. They may possibly even be what they profess to be, but we shall always call the best selection of such tales Grimm's Tales, simply because it is the best collection. The historical Aesop, in so far as he was historical, would seem to have been a Pyrrhogian slave, or at least not one to be specially and symbolically adorned with the Pyrrhodian cap of liberty. He lived, if he did live, about the 6th century before Christ, in the time of that Cratius, whose story we love and suspect, like everything else in Herodotus. There are also stories of deformity of feature and a ready ribaldry of tongue. Stories which, as the celebrated cardinal said, explain, though they do not excuse, his having been hurled over a high precipice at Delphi. It is for those who read the fables to judge whether he was really thrown over the cliff for being ugly and offensive, or rather for being highly moral and correct. But there is no kind of doubt that the general legend of him may justly rank him with a race too easily forgotten in our modern comparisons, the race of the great philosophic slaves. Aesop may have been a fiction like Uncle Remus. He was also like Uncle Remus, a fact. It is a fact that slaves in the old world could be worshipped like Aesop, or loved like Uncle Remus. It is odd to note that both the great slaves told their best stories about beasts and birds. But whatever be fairly due to Aesop, the human tradition called fables is not due to him. This had gone on long before any sarcastic freedman from Pyrrhogia had or had not been flung off a precipice. This has remained long after. It is to our advantage, indeed, to realize the distinction, because it makes Aesop more obviously effective than any other fabulist. Grimm's tales, glorious as they are, were collected by 2 German students, and if we find it hard to be certain of a German student, at least we know more about him than we know about a Pyrrhogian slave. The truth is, of course, that Aesop's fables are not Aesop's fables, any more than Grimm's fairy tales were ever Grimm's fairy tales. But the fable and the fairy tale are things utterly distinct. There are many elements of difference, but the plainest is plain enough. There can be no good fable with human beings in it, and there can be no good fairy tale without them. Aesop, or Barbarius, or whatever his name was, understood that, and for a fable, all the persons must be impersonal. They must be like abstractions in algebra, or like pieces in chess. The lion must always be stronger than the wolf, just as 4 is always double of 2. The fox in a fable must move crooked, as the knight in chess must move crooked. Crooked, as the knight in chess moved crooked. The sheep in a fable must march on, as the pawn in chess must march on. The fable must not allow for the crooked captures of the pawn. It must not allow for what Balzac called the revolt of a sheep. The fairy tale, on the other hand, absolutely revolves on the pivot of human personality. If no hero were to fight the dragons, we should not even know that they were dragons. If no adventurer were to cast on an undiscovered island, it would remain undiscovered. If the miller's 3rd son does not find the enchanted garden where the 7 princesses stand, white and frozen, why then, they will remain white and frozen and enchanted. If there is no personal prince to find the sleeping beauty, she will simply sleep. Fables repose upon quite the opposite idea, that everything is itself, and will, in any case, speak for itself. The wolf will always be wolfish, the fox will always be foxy. Something of the same sort may have been meant by the animal worship, in which Egyptian and Indian and any other great peoples had combined. Men do not, I think, love beetles or cats or crocodiles with a wholly personal love. They salute them as expressions of what abstract and anonymous energy in nature which to anyone is awful, and to an atheist must be frightful. So in all the fables that there are, or are not, Aesop's all the animal forces drive like innate forces, like great rivers or growing trees. It is the limit and the loss of all such things that they cannot be anything but themselves. It is their tragedy that they could not lose their souls. This is the immortal justification of the fable, that we could not teach the plainest truths so simply without turning men into chessmen. We cannot talk of such simple things without using animals that do not talk at all. Suppose for a moment that you turn the wolf into a wolfish baron, or the fox into a foxy diplomatist. You will at once remember that even barons are human, and you will unable to forget that even diplomatists are men. You will always be looking for that accidental good humor that should go with the brutality of any brutal man, for that allowance for all delicate things, including virtue, that should exist in any good diplomatist. Words and phrases. Excuse me. Once put a thing on 2 legs instead of 4, and pluck it of the feathers, and you cannot help asking for a human being, either heroic, as in fairy tales, or unheroic, as in the modern novels. But by using animals in this austere and arbitrary style, austere, A-U-S-T-E-R-E. Sorry, I'm not going to get that correct unless I already said it correctly. But by using animals in this austere and arbitrary style, as they are used in the shields of hot heraldry or the hieroglyphics of the ancients, men have really succeeded in handing down those tremendous truths that are called truisms. If the chivalric lion be red and rampant, it is rigidly red and rampant. If the sacred ibis stands anywhere on one leg, it stands on one leg forever. In this language, like a large animal alphabet, are written some of the first philosophic certainties of men. As a child learns A for ass, or B for bull, or C for cow, so man has learned here to connect the simpler and stronger creatures with the simpler and stronger truths. That a flowing stream cannot befoul its own foundation, and that any one who says it does is a tyrant and a liar. That a mouse is too weak to fight a lion, but too strong for the cords that can hold a lion. That a fox who gets most out of a flat dish may easily get least out of a deep dish. That the crow, whom the gods forbid to sing, the gods nevertheless will provide with cheese. That when the goat insults from a mountain top, it is not the goat that insults, but the mountain. All these are deep truths, deeply graven on the rocks wherever men have passed. It matters nothing how old they are or how new. They are the alphabet of humanity, which, like so many forms of primitive picture writing, employs any living symbol in preference to man. These ancient and universal tales are all of animals, as the latest discoveries in the oldest prehistoric caverns are of all animals. Man, in his simpler states, always felt that he himself was something too mysterious to be drawn. But the legend he carved under these cruder symbols was everywhere the same. And whether fables began with Aesop or began with Adam, whether they were German and medieval as Reynard the Fox, or as French and Renaissance as La Fontaine, the upshot is everywhere essentially the same. That superiority is always insolent, because it is always accidental. That pride goes before a fall, and that there is such a thing as being too clever by half. You will not find any other legend but this written upon the rocks by any hand of man. There is every type and time of fable, but there is only one moral to the fable, because there is only one moral to everything. G.K. Chesterton. And that was the introduction to Aesop's Fables, which apparently was put together by, it says Jones on the top, and I don't even remember reading. A new translation with V.S. Vernon Jones. Oh, and an introduction by G.K. Chesterton, and illustrations by Arthur Rackham. So, that's where these come from. And I did show it to you, because it was the first picture that we had. So there's a huge table of contents. Lots of different things. Lots of different fables. So depending on the length of the fables will determine how long and how many are in each episode. But holy cow. We have a table of contents of the chapters of different stories. We have a list of illustrations in color and in black and white. Lots and lots of pictures. And then we have the introduction that somebody colored in for as long as I can remember. Aesop's Fables. But this is already 15 minutes long. I think you're good for today. So we will close this and say, be careful with that and enjoy, please and thank you.